Hello and welcome to CHD Wise, an educational series for patients and families. My name is Amy Baskin and I will be your moderator for this evening's webinar. Tonight's episode is produced in partnership with Children's Hospital Colorado. We're very excited for their participation and their longtime partnership with our organization. On today's episode, we welcome several experts from Children's Hospital Colorado. Well, all together, we'll be talking about transparency and why it matters. We'll be welcoming Dr. Jaggers, who's the section chief of heart surgery at Colorado University. He's the co-medical director of the Children's Hospital Colorado Heart Institute, as well as the Barton Elliman Chair in Pediatric Cardiothoracic Surgery. We also have Dr. Dunbar Ivy. He's the co-director of the Heart Institute, the chief of pediatric cardiology, and Selby's chair in pediatric cardiology. We've got Dr. Cindy Barrett, the Director of Safety and Quality Improvement for the Heart Institute. And also joining us is Ms. Mary Kincaid. She's the mom to Jason, who's 3 years post-transplant and has received much of his care at the Children's Hospital of Colorado. Dr. Barrett, the Children's Hospital has been a leader in transparency for years. We were just talking about since the start of the conversation in the patient and family space. If you'd like to lead us off with some background information, we'd really appreciate it. Then we'll move to a quick Q&A dialogue. Dr. Barrett?
Thank you, Amy. And a deep thank you to the Conquering Congenital Heart Disease team for all that you've done in advocating for our patients and families around their education that also includes educating caregivers. Here, as you know, at the Children's Hospital Colorado Heart Institute, we are deeply committed to transparency in our patient care and our patient outcomes. This, of course, includes our remarkable successes, some of which are listed on this page, as well as areas that we are striving to be better in. Our focus on transparency really provides a true north for our team and encourages accountability, both on how we're doing and also for parents to see how we're doing. Our hospital serves a large region, actually a 7-state region, and we care for patients also in very remote areas. In addition to this, we also care for patients in a wide range of ages, all the way from fetal to adulthood. We're considered a high volume center by the Society of Thoracic Surgeons, also known as STS. The STS registry is one of the many registries that we report our data to. And these registries really allow us to compare how we're doing. We also post our outcomes on our Heart Institute website. And as you know, we use the Conquering Congenital Heart Disease guided questions to help guide our families and really try to make it a little bit easier for our patients and families by providing updated answers to these questions on that website as well. As you see from this slide, we're a sizable team. We have 50 cardiologists, 3 cardiac interventionalists, 4 congenital heart surgeons, and a host of other heart-related subspecialists throughout our organization. And our goal as a team is really to have all children become healthy adults and all of our adults to remain healthy across the spectrum of ages that we care for. We do this by comparing ourselves and our outcomes to other heart teams, and where we need to, we implement changes to improve our care. And that way we can actually ensure families that we are providing excellent care.
Fantastic, thank you. This is such a clear and concise way to share information for patients and families. We appreciate how you've used graphics and bright numbers to communicate and take in consideration health literacy. And this is just a simple example of your amazing leadership as it comes to communicating with patients and families. Thank you. So we're going to begin with the Q&A portion of our program. So everyone is welcome to turn on their screens. What we have done is we've curated questions that we've received historically about transparency and that are representative of the community's questions as a whole. So we'll address them each to the individual doctors, but I also hope this promotes some robust discussion. So our first question, Dr. Jaggers, we're gonna kick this one off to you. A mom reports, I just learned my baby has congenital heart disease. We live within driving distance of 3 different hospitals that could do my child's surgery. How do I decide where to go?
I mean, that is probably one of the most common questions we get asked, and it's a tough one because it's a very personalized decision about where to go. Many times mothers are informed that their baby has a congenital heart defect, and it's a huge swing in emotions because you've been dreaming about having this child. Now all of a sudden there's something that's going to have to be taken care of after delivery. So it's a pretty complicated decision too, because some kids with congenital heart disease don't even require significant amount of care right after birth, but many of them require intensive care right after birth. And so I think one of the most important things that parents need to understand is that it's important that their child is close to the care that they're going to need when they deliver. In some places you can deliver your baby right in a children's hospital. That's the way we are set up here in Denver. But other places, the hospitals are in close proximity, but in other places, the hospitals are not close, and it would require an ambulance ride to get from one hospital to where your child is going to need to get care. So those are important things to figure out after you've made the diagnosis of your fetus or your unborn baby's heart defect. There's a lot of questions to ask. It's really important that you are comfortable where your child is going to eventually get care. And sometimes that's going to take having multiple conversations with the different programs that you mentioned, 3 different programs. It's perfectly fine to interview each one of those programs, interview the doctors at each one of those programs, interview the surgeons, interview the fetal cardiologists to figure out where you're going to be most comfortable delivering your child and eventually where your child's going to have he or she's care. Sometimes people get just a gut feeling when they talk to their caregivers, and that's really a valuable sort of barometer of where you might want to have your kid's operation or your kid's cardiac care. And it's okay to ask tough questions. I mean, if your child has hypoplastic left heart syndrome, it's okay to ask each one of these centers, what are your outcomes for hypoplastic left heart syndrome? What does your team look like? How do kids do between their stage surgeries? Things like that, really tough questions. And if centers can't answer those questions for you, then you need to sort of think twice, because we all need to know how we're doing and what our outcomes are. Otherwise, we will never get better. So I think those are important questions to ask. I think that in general, you want to be at a place where there are multidisciplinary teams. So when you talk about your child being born with a complex heart defect, you want to make sure that you have specialized care in all areas: anesthesia, cardiology, fetal cardiology, surgery. Those are all really important things when it comes to complex cardiac care. So those are just some of the things to think about. But most importantly, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to really look into this, because in the end, the safety of your child. So those are my only thoughts.
No, thank you very much. Anyone else have anything to add?
I really appreciated Dr. Jaggers calling out the need for that multidisciplinary team. That it's true, you want an excellent interventionalist or surgeon doing the procedure. You also want those excellent respiratory therapists and cardiac nurses And all those folks, including intensive care doctors, other imaging doctors, that can really just come together as a team and be able to provide that kind of day-to-day expertise that is often some of the richest part of care that patients receive while they're in a hospital setting.
I have something to kind of add to that too. And Dr. Barrett, I don't know if you can kind of add on to this or explain some of this. How important is it for parents to ask about post-care, and how important is it to talk about post-care and cardiac specific ICUs opposed to PICUs for their heart kit?
Well, I do have to mention that I come in with a little bias because I work as a cardiac ICU attending. So, and that's the environment that I feel like I'm able and my colleagues are able to give excellent care. I think that, you know, heart care is really a variation on a theme. So if you think about classical music and all those kind of different themes that run through, and you want your team to be able to notice each of those variations and tailor their care appropriately to what the child or adult needs at the time. So it means that all of us have committed to this type of medicine in the way that our nursing staff is hugely important to have that cardiac specific focus. They understand arrhythmias, they are able to understand cardiac physiology and some of the issues we might face in postoperative care. And as you mentioned, that postoperative care is so important because you sometimes get through the heart surgery and you're on top of the world, it's gone great, and then your baby needs to learn how to eat. And that's sometimes feels like a marathon after a really hard sprint. And I think having those team members like nutrition and our dietary folks, our physical therapy folks, and this is really their cohort of patients. As a physician in this, it's luxurious because they understand what the patients I'm taking care of need, and they're able to really counsel families and know when things are going differently for a child versus some other children that may have come through that would prompt a further investigation or maybe another multidisciplinary team member to become involved.
Can you add or build on that a little bit more? And I don't know if maybe Dr. Ivy can do this, but one of the things, and Dr. Jaggers too, we talk about data, and we should ask about a center's data. And I know one of the most important pieces of data can be volume. And you talk about that a little bit when you're talking about the experience of your staff and how they're committed to this issue. But what role does volume play in the performance or how well they can understand your child's anatomy?
So I think volume is a very important indicator, and many studies have suggested that the more volume a center has, the better and greater experience they have. But I would say, you know, we all know that that's very important, but I think, you know, each, as Dr. Jaggers says, each family and child is unique, and maybe a family doesn't have the opportunity to go to one of the super large volume programs, and they could get excellent care, you know, at a smaller program. But I think one of the keys is dedication. That if the care for the patient who's had open heart surgery is in a dedicated area with a dedicated team, sometimes that's not under cardiac ICU, it's under the pediatric intensive care unit. So you really need to ask questions, and that's what makes it harder, is that you really need to ask a lot of questions, and don't be shy about doing that. But in general, back to your question, Amy, I think the larger the volume in general, the greater the experience, the more the team sees, the more, you know, multidisciplinary teams that are available, that those centers are a little more advanced.
Thank you.
Amy, I can expound on that a little bit too. I agree completely with what Dr. Ivy said, but also the studies have been fairly clear when we try to compare volume and outcome that the most complex cardiac defects, that's where the higher volume centers excel, and most higher volume centers excel. Simpler, less complex defects, there's some smaller centers do well in those, but complex heart defects, you really need to do a lot of those to get really good at them, and you really need to have a big team. So that's where differences in outcomes really show up.
So I'm hearing again, asking questions. I remember when we first learned that Nicholas had a heart defect, I didn't even know what complex versus simple was. To me, he was having heart surgery and that was very complex. So I think it's important to ask, even just how complicated is my child's surgery, and some of those questions, in addition to all these others that we've listed. I think it's really important to learn as much as you can about your child's or your own defects so that you understand what the lifelong needs are.
Yeah, and Amy, I'd give a lot of credit to the Conquering CHD, PCHA previously that, when we had some conversations, you and Dave Kesnick and I in 2014, certainly transparency of outcomes was very important, but as you both as parents noted, is just hard to get information about the specific congenital defect and about the centers. And I'd say thanks to you and Conquering CHD, I think we as a community have come a long, long way in terms of helping families, and particularly new families, on their journey in terms of what is it? What do I need to do? What do I need to ask? Where should I go for information? And I think your website is really leading the way for a lot of great information for parents and patients.
Thank you. We'll talk more about this, but we do have a lot of resources on our website, as Dr. Ivy mentioned, so I'll brag about them for 2 seconds. So we can visit those. We've got the guided questions tool, which does provide a list of very specific questions that you can ask. We have them for the different ages. Like Dr. Barrett said, we appreciate that this is a lifespan issue, so we have questions if your child is unborn or an infant, or a teenager. We have guided questions for adult patients as well. We've had those translated to Spanish, so they're available to a broader community. We also have the Children's Colorado site, which is excellent to look at and review for the questions to ask your cardiologist. And then we have additional information that we'll talk about later when we look at what to do when asking for a second opinion, which ties in with the data part. But we have quite a bit of resources that we'll address that again at the end. Are we ready for our second question? All right. This question we get on our social media pages quite a bit. It says, I'm in this Facebook group and people are always talking about the best centers. My insurance doesn't really give me a choice as to which doctors I can see, and we really can't afford to travel to a different place anyway. So how do I know if the center that I'm at is safe?
So I can start with some answers to that. I think a great place to start is the guided questions tool. And again, I think a parent is the best advocate of all for their child. And you should ask the center that's close to you, or perhaps where your child is, these very specific questions about how many of these surgeries they do, how many surgeries do they do, what are the specific outcomes for the congenital heart defect that your child may have. And I think those are very valuable. I would also say that most very good centers have a very robust website that includes the outcomes of surgery at their center. So you could just Google congenital heart outcomes, put put the center close to you there, or put the two centers next to you there. And one quote unquote red flag is if you don't see anything there. If you're not seeing any specifics, first I would call the center and try to ask. But if you're not getting very concrete answers from the website or from speaking to them, that is a red flag. As Dr. Jaggers said, I think the more complex the problem, the bigger the center we usually, recommend. And if it's something that's more straightforward, then, they can say, we've done, 40 of these surgeries in the last 4 years, and our survival is 100%. And here's what I can tell you. And then I think you should feel very safe at that center. But if it's a center, if your child has a very complex defect, and they're only doing a few of those in 4 years, then you may consider looking to a larger center. So again, be an advocate for your child. Look at these resources on the Conquering CHD website. Ask those questions, and also feel free to call another center and get a sense for what their outcomes are like. And just because you call doesn't mean that you're signing up that you have to go there to have your child's surgery there. You're just looking for information. And these days, we all expect that.
Excellent. Anyone else have anything to add? I can just share my personal experience as well. When there were some concerns about whether or not my son was a good candidate to have surgery at this center, I ended up having to talk to my insurance company and be an advocate with them because I didn't have a choice, or so I thought. And when I was able to share this data with them, and I could build a case that this was not the best center for my child to have surgery, I was able to successfully talk to that surgical center and get referred to another center. But it took some work, and it's not easy, and it required courage. But I strongly encourage people to ask questions about that. Anyone else? All right, next question. We just received this email actually a couple weeks ago. My teenage daughter may or may not need surgery, and my doctors seem like they know the best plan, but I'm just not sure and I don't feel comfortable. How do I go about getting that second opinion? We've been talking about this a little bit. How do we actually do the second opinion thing? Dr. Barrett, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you, Amy. Yeah, so I think second opinions are terrific. And as Dr. Ivy said, in this day of information gathering, it's expected. So don't feel like you're hurting the team you're currently thinking about going with versus another team. That asking questions, having that courage, as you stated, Amy, to be able to ask those questions, that second opinions can be gathered either from your care team, and sometimes they will help you initiate a second opinion. And if they don't, or if you feel more comfortable, parents can initiate second opinions. And there are several groups that offer this. We're one of those groups that offer a second opinion process. And that way, as a parent, you know at least what another center would think in the same situation. It's very hard to want to have your child or yourself go to the operating room. And so having that confirmation, whether you choose to stay where you are or go somewhere else, it's such a comfort at that point to know that two centers would both advise the same surgical or other type of intervention. As a parent, I've gotten second opinions, not about cardiac stuff, but other things, and having those two centers do that, it's just terrific. The willingness and openness of the center that you're at to be able to initiate a second opinion can vary. And I would just reassure you that it's not, although it takes courage, it's not unusual. It's okay to ask, and being that advocate is hugely important.
I would just add that, when I get a call for a second opinion, I would say it's more common that I agree with the team or the team's approach where they are. So, certainly there's some disagreements, but a lot of times, as has been said, I was like, yeah, we would do the same thing. We would take the same approach. We would do the same studies. So again, don't feel that you're, hurting your child or the relationship with the team by saying, I just like to ask somebody else just to be sure.
I guess I'll chime in here too. Jaggers, you want to go first?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. You guys all know Jason. Our family has been on the receiving and the referring end multiple times. Jason was really complicated multiple times. Jason was a hypoplastic baby, very, very complicated hypoplastic baby, complex. And at one point, Children's Colorado couldn't do anything else. He wasn't a surgical candidate. And I was that parent who was extremely scared to ask for that second opinion because I loved my team. I was scared. I didn't want to think I was, you guys to think I was ungrateful or, to think that I didn't love the team there. So I was scared. But when I asked, hey, I don't want to take this and just accept this as my kid's fate. I know that Max Mitchell took that and said, you know what, if there's a time to ask for a second opinion, it's right now. And he actually welcomed that and helped me through that process and held my hand the entire way. We went, had that surgery, and I was welcomed back to Children's with open arms. And then when it was time for transplant time, I know that, and of course I'm going to get emotional, but when it was time for that time, I chose to stay at Children's Colorado because I felt comfortable and I built that trust with you guys because I knew that if it came down to it, you guys would make the best decision for him. And then when it was time for his transplant, you evaluated him, and it was time to make sure that the best quality of life was the number one priority. So that was number one priority. And although we had the choice between the two hospitals, when it was time for transplant, we chose Children's for that reason because we developed that trust and we were comfortable and Jim was comfortable with that relationship also. So don't be scared to ask for those second opinions. You're not going to be, you shouldn't be ever scared for that. So.
Thank you, Mary, for sharing that experience. Dr. Jaggers, before we go to the next question, did you have something else to add?
I was just going to say that, as the caregivers, as the surgeons and the cardiologists, getting second opinions, we actually welcome them because it's a good way for us to learn as well. It's surprising that things aren't done the same way everywhere. And it's always good to hear if somebody else has got a new idea or a new way of doing something or has a different plan. So again, reinforcing that no one should ever have any regrets or concerns about asking for another opinion.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's hard sometimes. Again, it's back to that courage and asking questions, and but it is so important. And thank you all for that reassurance and reinforcement about the importance of asking questions and seeking a second opinion when you feel it's appropriate. All right, our next question is our last question for today. This one is a question that I hear when we visit our state chapters and we get to go into the hospitals and learn. This question comes up often. I was so overwhelmed when my child was in the hospital. I just didn't know what to do. And this parent said, it was only the first of 3 surgeries. I felt like I didn't know anything, but I was too afraid to ask questions. What can I do differently for this second surgery? And we've talked about this a little bit, but Mary, I know you have been a tremendous advocate for your child while in the hospital. Do you want to share a little bit of your growth? You talked about, how you were really scared at first to be asking for the second opinion, but yet you became an incredible advocate for your child's needs and your own needs while in the hospital.
Yeah, I actually hear this a lot within the heart community. Many parents like myself, prior to having my heart warrior, spent little to no time in the medical environment. So the terminology and even like the personnel within the hospital can sometimes seem really intimidating. The best advice I can give to this parent or any parent out there is to remember that you are now one of the key components to your child's team. Your child's doctors need you just as much as you need them. Your child needs you all as a team to recover. Your child's team kind of depend on your input because it's detrimental for them to have you for a smooth recovery. You know your child better than anyone. I would say since it is this person's second surgery go around, you as the parent know your child's personality, you know their cues, you know what they love, what they hate, you know what they respond to, you know what they don't respond to, you know what in the past, what has worked, what hasn't. So if it were me, I would try to be an active part of the team like right away. For instance, you may notice something about your child's behavior that has changed or a mental status that has changed that you need to tell the team about. That's important that they may not notice. I know at Children's, the team encourages the families to be active during like rounds in the morning. And that's a really great time to learn like what the goals are for the day or the night. And it's a great time for us as parents to ask questions. And when you're asking questions, you may not understand the first time around and you can ask multiple times, hey, I didn't understand that. Can you explain it differently? And just always remember that you're a vital part of the team and you know your child better than anyone a part of that team. And you can just say, hey, can we talk about that? And, your doctors are doctors for a reason and you should respect that. But you also need to understand they respect you as their parent too. So just talk, have conversations. And also, centers want us as parents to learn. And we've got to understand that too. They want us to learn. They want us to understand because the more we understand, the better outcomes our kids are going to have in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add to that, I think a couple of things that we talk about here at Conquering CHD is that your child is in the clinical setting for a very relatively short period of time. It may be a long hospital stay, but you as a parent see your child in and out a day by day and can have so much more to offer than just the clinical snapshot. So I think it's important to think about, numbers and outcomes from that perspective. Is your child's body doing well? But it's also important to consider functional outcomes and how is your child behaving and how are they growing and thriving, and looking at those outcomes and contributing that to the team can provide a much better picture of your child as a whole.
Amy, I'll just add on to that a little bit. This kind of gets back to something we were talking about earlier, is talking about the team. So a lot of the things that parents struggle with at home, not necessarily related to your child's heart. It's the feeding issues, it's vaccinations, it's growth and development, neurodevelopment. And that's why it's really important that you have this multidisciplinary team that has all these other support systems. So you can call the dietitian, you can call or email the psychologist, and get the help you need when you're at home. And certainly in the hospital, we have all these these different support systems set up. But when you're home, you need access to those things as well. So having a good broad team is invaluable.
Excellent point. Dr. Ivy or Dr. Barrett, anything to add?
Oh, nothing. We said most of it. Maybe Cindy does. I don't know.
I've just gotten the fun and luxury of taking care of Mary and Jason while they're in house, and I can say that having parents that understand and can help. We've had to find a couple of diagnostic surprises in his history, and having her understand and know him was incredibly beneficial. And I really know all of this takes courage and the willingness to kind of be in a place that's overwhelming and confusing at times. And I think that, you know, the majority of team members just want to be able to join in and just have our families understand and be able to provide information. And I know in the case of Mary's son that it was hugely helpful in day-to-day care aspects. So please do so, even though it may feel uncomfortable at first.
Yeah, Becca, thanks for changing the slide. It does include some of the other supports that make a great team. If you look at the bottom, it includes nutrition support, physical therapy, speech therapy, programs for wellness and mental health aspects and things to consider. These are conversations, obviously, that you can have after your child has had surgery, and that's what we're advocating for here, but also before, as you're learning about your center. Don't hesitate to ask about these things that you'll need throughout your child's care, or even as an adult. You know, what are these programs available to you as an adult? Are all important and accessible to help maximize your care. As we're wrapping up, does anyone else have anything to add that we may have missed? All right, I just want to say thank you again. If Becca wants to forward the slides, we have some resources that are available. You can, again, I can't stress enough to go to Children's Colorado's website for some clear information that you can use and learn from. We also have on our website the Hospital Navigator, which is a source for some of this data we've been talking about today. It includes numbers of surgeries. It includes how complex of surgeries that they do, which is another thing we talked about. It looks at some of the programs that are available at the hospitals. You'll see a check mark if there's a program available. And then it digs a little bit deeper into this idea of how many kids survived or were lost in surgery. And that's harder to understand, but we've tried to include several videos and things with that to help you understand how well a hospital is doing. And you can use the Navigator to search hospitals across the country. It has a map function to it. So we encourage you to take a look at that. If the center that you're considering or that you have gone to is not on the Navigator, please don't hesitate to reach out to the hospital directly to get that information. But you could also bug them and say, hey, why aren't you on the Navigator yet? And we'll see if we can continue to grow our numbers on the Navigator. At the end, we have additional information available, but I do want to reinforce that this has been part of a long-term partnership with Children's Hospital Colorado. We are so grateful for the Heart Institute and the partnership that we have, their support for transparency of public reporting, just generally loving their patients. So we're thankful. They have led the way with many of our activities as it comes to transparency and public reporting. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. There are multiple opportunities to connect with us, and there will be links to these various resources on the website. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.